What language do we need to communicate to our partners, our friends, our colleagues, etc., where they're headed towards the boundary, and what happens then from me to them when you're in the 5-inch zone?
I think what's happening is the way that I'm describing what a boundary is the expectation that you hold of yourself. And then the way that it's communicated to others is the need or the expectations. Hey, Evolvers, it's Bianca.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Emilia.
What we are going to be diving into today is probably one of the most misunderstood therapy tools and concepts that is out there. And what that is boundaries. You and I both have clients try to talk to us about this every single day. And you and I have also talked about the fact that most of our clients are trying to enforce boundaries without understanding what they actually are. And that's what's making it hard for them to actually set boundaries, stick to them, and then eventually get their needs met. And so,
Right.
what we're going to be diving into today for all of you is it's a few different things. So, number one, let's have a shared understanding of what is a boundary and what is not a boundary. And then, number two, what are the different types of boundaries and how do you go about setting them? I have so many clients who will come to me and say, everyone keeps crossing my boundaries, or I don't know how to set a boundary, or I'm telling people that I don't want this, but they're doing it anyways and they're crossing my boundaries. And what we'll do is I'll kind of break it down with them and I'll say, okay, well, tell me what you're doing. Tell me what this process is looking like for you. Tell me what you said or tell me what you felt. And what it always comes down to, almost always, is they weren't actually setting a boundary. They weren't actually doing what it was that they needed. And because there was a lot of other underlying things going on, like fear of judgment or people pleasing or not wanting to piss anybody off, they didn't end up sticking with it. They were more afraid of the other person than they were of reinforcing their needs. So let's dive into it from the get. So you let me know if you disagree, or actually let me rephrase that. Add on whatever you think I'm missing.
I love it. Great reframe.
A boundary is not a expectation that you put onto somebody else. A boundary is not an expectation. A boundary is something that you put into place by yourself for yourself. So, for example, a boundary of mine is I will not go out on weekdays and I don't allow myself to go to bed past 9 p.m. That is my boundary. It's what I am doing for myself. A boundary is not, you can't ask me to go out past 9 p.m. Because a boundary is what you are doing for you with yourself. Thoughts, additions?
I think that that's a great start. And to add to that, I do believe, in addition to what you said, and in slightly contrast to what you said, but still in the same vein, I do think that boundaries can be rules of behavior, which is what you just communicated around, like what you won't do and what you will do. And I do think that it can be an expectation of other people when you communicate that. I don't think that it's fair to have that expectation if you're not communicating it. So I'm right there with you in terms of it is way more self-focused, and how you just communicated the definition, the shared language around how self-focused it is. To add to that, I know that when we have the shared language around boundaries, I want to like zoom out a little bit, because oftentimes we're not necessarily starting from the ground up, rather it's more top down, meaning that we set in place our current understanding, which by the way is usually not academic or educational or scientific. It's just simply like emotion informed, which is like, oh, I feel uncomfortable that someone's calling me out. Boom, I'm going to quote unquote set a boundary, right? We take it from that approach, as opposed to the what I'm going to refer to as the bottom up approach, which is why do boundaries exist in the first place? It's because they're in efforts to be a vessel, a tool to honor an established need, to honor, not protect, but to honor an established value. So those two things, I think, need to be at the starting point, and think about it as like the core of why boundaries even exist and why they're beneficial as a tool, a system, and or a process to get our needs met. And so that can form in the way of a rule of our behavior, an expectation of our own selves, a expressed need or concern or desire that gets fulfilled. And boundaries are a means to that end of honoring our need and or value.
No, I really appreciate the reframe. You definitely expressed. I was trying to say that. You expressed it way better. So thank you. It was way more articulate. You know what I think a really big issue that a lot of people have is what happens if a boundary gets crossed. I think people have this understanding that other people are supposed to somehow kind of like fix it, rather than us having the understanding of, hey, listen, because this is a conversation I have with a lot of clients of mine. They'll be like, they crossed my boundary and now they need to do this to make it better. I don't necessarily think that's helpful. When someone crosses a boundary, there needs to be an if-then statement within yourself.
Which is a rule of behavior. Love it.
Exactly. If this happens, then here's what I'm going to do. So if let's say I don't like and I'm not comfortable being asked to go out past 9 p.m. And I've said this to Emilia, which it's funny because Emilia never leaves her house, so it's not a good example, but whatever. Go clubbing. Let's say Emilia wants to go out, but I've told her like many, many times, I don't like going out past 9 p.m. I don't go out on school nights. Like on Mondays and Fridays, like I got to be up at 5, and I really don't like going out. And honestly, I would really appreciate it if you didn't ask, because then I feel guilty. And then, I'll make myself feel bad and I'll end up whatever, right? The focus is on me. It's not on Emilia. The focus is on me. I don't like this. I'm asking that this doesn't happen.
Yep.
Let's say Emilia does, right? Let's say she's like, B, come out with me. And I'm like, M, honestly, like I've expressed this before. I really don't, it's out of alignment for me, but thank you. I appreciate it. Go have fun. Now let's say she does it again. That is where the boundary gets crossed, where I have expressed this. This is my boundary. I don't do this. What do you do in response? What most people do is they'll say...
add a quick label to that, B? Because I want people to know it's expressed dissent. I am descending and trying to gain proximity away from what just happened. And the fact that that just happened, it's expressed dissent from the boundary. Keep going.
Thank you. So if Emilia asks me again, what a lot of people do is they'll say, you crossed my boundary. That's not really helpful, because you're not then saying what it is that you want. You're not saying what it is that you need. You're throwing blame at the other person, and then it's kind of being left at that. That's what happens with most of my clients. So what I will do with clients is I will say, you need to create the if-then statement for yourself. If this happens, here's what I'm going to do. So if Emilia consistently asks me to do this, even though I've expressed many, many times, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm not okay with it, I would prefer if we did this instead, then I'm going to express my if then statement. So if this happens, then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove myself from the situation and I'm going to say, I'm not going to go out with you anymore. Or I'm not going to continue this friendship. Or I'm not going to continue engaging because I've asked this and this boundary has been crossed. And, it sounds like, I'm not being heard. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove myself from the situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The focus is on your behavior. This is where, like radical leadership and radical self-ownership comes into play. This doesn't take away from the person's behavior. This is what you're doing in response to the person's behavior. Because what a lot of us do is we expect the other person to change. It's like, you crossed my boundary, so you need to change. It's like, you have fun with that. You'll never succeed. It won't work. What you can do is create the if then statement, though. If this continues to happen, here's what I'm going to do. This is what's in alignment for me.
I love that because of the fact that it reminds me of a concept. I want to say author Kim Scott, I believe that's her name, but she has a book out there that's called Radical Candor. And her book is really focused in on, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And the concept of it is exactly what you're talking about, where her book is really focused in on a workplace context where, kind of like coming from the manager standpoint, if your employee is kind of like screwing up, would you rather be take a manipulative insincerity standpoint? Would you rather be obnoxiously aggressive and or passive aggressive, or would you have a degree of ruinous empathy? And all of those are not effective for a relationship from a manager to a coworker or a colleague to a colleague, right? And so the concept of radical candor is what I like to say, and what in nonviolent communication IFS modality is like, it is really scary to have an if then for us. It's really scary to have needs and wants because we want to believe that other people want to respect them and support them and honor them. And more often than not, when you get behind the scenes, right, like I'll do with couples and or just anyone, right, and having these interactions, people want to honor your boundaries. People want to honor your needs and desires. It's more often the time, though, that they have no idea what the hell they are. And if they have been expressed, it's not assimilating in their brain how they are crossing that line, for lack of better words. And so what often happens is we don't have radical candor, i.e. candor is like just truth giving. Here's where my line is. This is my need. This is my want. This is my desire. And this is my value, that this boundary that you just crossed over, which by the way is actually 2 feet out from me, not 5 like you think it is, or not 1 like you think it is. This is what I need you to understand about this, and or this is what I need in this relationship, because boundaries are there to help in specifically interpersonal relationships, right? They're the vessel that helps us exist with a degree of comfort, safety, and I would say peace amongst our tribe, right? Amongst other people.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications at a radio station here in central Massachusetts. I can say it's been nothing but great. Kind of diving into myself and realizing that I need to step out of my comfort zone and build that confidence in my insecurities, but also maintaining who I am as a person. This is a community that's not forcing anything upon you, that wants you to feel nothing but welcome. And it's just super genuine and super honest too, which I like. And again, just recognizing that you are your own person on your own journey, but everybody in the community is here with you. And, we're all at different stages in life, and that's a very important thing to recognize. So Emilia, Bianca, and Derek especially have helped me get to the point where I'm able to kind of excel in my career and in my personal life.
And so this element of radical candor is when the line is crossed, or when a relationship is pointed or angling towards that boundary being potentially crossed, it is our responsibility to name that radical candor, to name what is starting to be angled towards a crossing? What language do we need to communicate to our partners, our friends, our colleagues, etc., where they're headed towards the boundary, and what happens then from me to them when that you're in the 5-inch zone. And what they can expect from me is a warning. What they can expect from me is a vulnerable share. What they can expect from me is, if they've crossed it and I've communicated multiple times, is a slightly elevated and escalated rigidity of that boundary, meaning a hard if then. If you're not going to honor the fact that I don't want to talk about my finances with you because I feel unsafe, because this has been brought up multiple times, I'm literally going to leave this party when I see you. Right? That's a hardcore rigid boundary. So this is where the different types of boundaries, when you understand what boundaries are for, when you understand and have a shared meaning and recognize that they're a really, really powerful and important tool to help understand and navigate our relationships, to feel safe and comfortable in them, while staying and maintaining integrity with our version of our highest self, while staying and maintaining integrity with our highest level of virtue that we aspire to, so that we're not self-inflicting personal moral injury and or intrapersonal trauma.
Yeah. Do you know what I think is happening?
Tell me.
I think I have an understanding of boundaries slightly different than you do, and that's why we're having a slightly different
Angle.
I think you're combining things and I'm trying to separate them. So
Probs.
Before we move on to the different types of boundaries, I think what's happening is, the way that I'm describing what a boundary is the expectation that you hold of yourself. And then the way that it's communicated to others is the need or the expectation. So like, my boundary for myself is I don't go to bed past 9 p.m. The expectation or the rule or the request that I am then asking of the other person is to not ask me to not ask me to go. It sounds like I'm separating them and you're kind of combining them into one shared mechanism. Do you see them as different, or do you see them all as like one system? Because the way that I've communicated it to clients, it's helped them to separate it, because when they understand that the boundary is the thing that I'm doing for me, and then what I need to do is learn how to set a rule for that, or an expectation or a need with others, it helps them to then see, did I cross my own boundary by not doing that? How do I ask that for others? And how do I know when they're not going in line with the request or the expectation that I have then set?
Great. And I love that. And I think that this is where our approaches are unique and different. And this is actually really cool. So in real time, right, our listeners are seeing our approaches. So I do see it as a bigger system at play, and I do break that down for clients. However, I would encourage clients to zoom out a little bit to see, again, from that bottom-up approach, what is that rule, what is that behavior that your system is naturally asking or craving and whatnot for other people? What need, what value is that tied to? So think of it like an anchor. I would even ask you, for that bedtime example, what is the need and what is the value that's underneath that rule of behavior, that expectation of self is actually grounded and rooted in? Because when you can clarify that to yourself, the languaging of the if-then statements, the expectations of self, etc., it comes from that place, that groundedness, that anchor of, this is a need that I have, and I'm going to recognize that need, bear witness to that need, acknowledge and validate that need and that value that I have, and move to adjust my approach in efforts to honor that.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I think we're saying the exact same thing. I think we're just saying it a little. We're saying the same concept. I think we're just saying it a little bit differently. So we're aligned.
Cool.
We're completely aligned.
So would you be willing to zoom out and define for our listeners, like, given the languaging that you have, what is the underlying need? Because needs are very contingent upon the person. That's why boundaries, in essence, they're a tool, but they do have to be customized because of every individual's needs are very different, you know, and values are very different. So what is the value and or need
Yeah.
that boundary that you just communicated would be grounded to?
No, that's great. So this ties into the last episode. So a boundary is a thing that you set when you are trying to uphold a value or a need within yourself.
Mhm.
And then the expectation that you have of others is to help you meet that need. So, like,
Yes.
my need and my value is good health and good sleep.
Okay.
My rule or my boundary is not going out on weekdays and or ensuring that I'm in bed by 9.
Okay. So that's
My
rule of self.
yeah. My request or my request and therefore the expectation that I need to communicate. I can't just have people freaking mind read, which is what a lot of us do.
Right. Right. So requests of others and expectations of others. Okay.
The request that I am going to make, and if we have a good relationship, my request is going to be somewhat of an expectation that you uphold it, is please do not ask me because I know myself and I'm going to feel guilty, which is why the boundary needs to be there in the first place. Because I'm going to feel guilty and self-awareness. I know this about myself, and I might betray my own boundary because of a lack of self-discipline.
Yeah.
So the request is, please do not ask. If the person continues to ask, even though you've done all of these things, you've asked them, you've had a conversation, you've had a shared understanding of why this is so important to you, blah, 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 and they continue to do it, this is when then the if-then statement comes out. Hey, listen, I've asked you a bunch of times. I've really expressed why this is important to me. I've expressed to you the need that I have here. Here's what I'm now going to do. If this keeps happening, if you keep asking and if you keep doing this thing, here's what I'm going to do. I'm pulling myself out. What a lot of people do is they'll say, you need to stop. That's my boundary. That's not a boundary. The boundary is, what are you going to do? And framing it like that to clients, at least for me, has helped them understand their role in it and how they can approach their relationships differently. Because expecting people to change is a losing game, but setting expectations for yourself of what you're going to do, it puts you back in the driver's seat of your own life.
1,000%. I went through this with a client yesterday, and she's trying to understand what is the underlying need. And so getting clear on that and getting clear on the value that she has, to where these behaviors that are happening in her world between herself and a coworker, former partner, and now trying to navigate the different boundaries that she's overlapping between personal and intimate partnership and professional, and trying to figure out where the boundaries between what we formerly were, which was intimate partners, to now where we are, which is professional colleagues now.
Woof.
With a past of an ex. So it's boundaries can get so tricky. But here's the thing, they're so vitally important, because we as humans, we have needs and we have values, and we need support in our own internal systems to enable, activate, or partner with the behaviors that help us increase our own probability of getting our needs met and our values honored. And so we need help with that. And boundaries are a great living, breathing thing to do that. So there's definitely a peel off that we're going to do on this episode when it comes to, okay, now that we have a shared definition of what a boundary is and what it's designed for, what its utility is in the world of interpersonal relationships and or intrapersonal relationship, which is the relationship that my parts have to one another. Then we go from there. What are the different types of boundaries? And this is where the if-then statements, pretty much think about it as like a dial. Kind of like you turn the dial up, like one of those like light dials where it like literally vertically goes up, and it's like
dimmable
brighter
ones?
lights. Yeah, the dimmable ones. So picture our life and our boundaries like dials where you can turn them up, and that if they're all the way turned up, that's quite a rigid boundary, right? That's one type of boundary. If you turn it all the way down, it's a very porous boundary, one that just lets anyone come in and out. We want to have our dials, aka our boundaries, at a very healthy level, which is right at that 5, right? And so the next episode that we're going to get into around boundaries is distinguishing the different types of them and what is the languaging that differentiates between the types so that we can approach our boundaries, our boundary setting, our boundary upholding, and our boundary keeping in a manner that honors our own values and needs and interpersonal dynamics.
Very nice. So make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already so that you don't miss that when that episode comes out. What is your final takeaway and episode suggestion?
My final takeaway is that boundaries are a very important skill that is wildly underestimated, and it has far more to do with us and how we navigate our own selves than it does with other people. And I think that
Well
is the
said.
biggest takeaway that I can close this episode on with my final episode suggestion of 283 Motivation Monday. Don't get fooled by these red flags.
A common problem that so many of my clients, and I'm sure yours do, face is feeling selfish for setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries are only selfish if you don't believe that you're deserving of your needs being met. Because if you follow the train of thought of where this conversation led, a boundary is something that you set in place to honor your values and or your needs. And if you don't believe that you are deserving of your needs being met, then you are going to feel selfish for setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
My episode suggestion is 306, how to not get walked over. If you don't believe you're deserving and you don't set boundaries, you will get walked over, which is something I faced more times than I will want to admit and care to talk about. And if this is something that you've struggled with too, reach out, send us a DM, message us on the evolveventurestech.com website. We cannot wait to hear from you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.